Eraloduđđo Eddja Eraloduđđo Eddja. So goes a prayer in Eraloduđđo Eddja, the language of the stars. That is the language that will be the subject of this Conlang Showcase video. To begin with, this here is the landmass on which the language of the stars is spoken. It is a mountainous island surrounded by ocean and a few scattered islands far away. It is spoken in this approximate area, originating from the highlands at the center of the island and spreading outwards. The language can be split into three main dialect groups: the southern, the western, and the eastern. These can be further split into individual dialects, though all of these will not be spoken of in this video. Rather, I will focus on the three standard dialects shown here. What unites these dialect groups is their largely similar phonetic inventories. As shown on the screen, the sounds are ma, na, nya, nga, ba, da, ga, za, ja, va, dha, sa, sha, ja, ha, wa, ya, ra, la. Though the trilled R in the Western dialect has been replaced by an approximant r due to borrowing from other languages. Most of the sounds except affricates, sh, and h can be geminated. Some sounds like v and th are always geminated, except when they occur at the end of a word. Along with that, fricatives except the palatals and h can be palatalized, as well as plosives. This system evolved from a relatively less complex phonological system, that being ma, na, nya, nga, pa, ta, tia, ka, a, tsa, cha, sa, sha, ha, ha, wa, ya, ra, la, ya. This phonology includes a palatal and glottal plosive, along with a distinction between the velar and glottal fricative, and a distinction between the alveolar and palatal lateral approximants. Moving on to the vowel inventory, it is pretty simple. It includes a three-way height distinction, along with a two-way front-back distinction. This evolved from a more complex system with two close central vowels, I and U, though this distinction was lost early on in the star language's evolution. And speaking of evolution, it is way too complex to cover fully in this video, but this here should give a general idea of what happened. At first, there was a loss of unstressed vowels in many environments, leading to most sounds getting a geminated version. Some sounds merged with others or disappeared completely, such as the palatal lateral approximant merging with its alveolar counterpart. Ha and the glottal plosive a were completely dropped. Out of this emerged new sounds, such as the labial and dental fricatives, and ha having a revival emerging from cha. Then came palatalization of certain consonants in front of e and e. Last major sound change was the simplification of many words by final plosive and vowel drop. All in all, this has resulted in a syllable structure of CVC, where the consonants are optional, not any different from the language it evolved from. Like its ancestor language, the language of the stars keeps a first syllable stress system. The syntax, however, is different from its ancestor language. The language of the stars has an SOV word order, where the ancestor language had a VSO word order. Adjectives and adverbs come before what they modify, opposite of what the ancestor language did. The possessor comes before the possessee, and the possessor is the one marked by the genitive case. Like its ancestor language, the language of the stars had prepositions, has prepositions rather than postpositions, and the dependent clause comes after the main clause. With that said, I will move on to the grammar. So here are the features that I find interesting and unique about this language compared to others in the area. The features being split ergativity based on an animacy hierarchy, which also governs other things, a mix of agglutinative and fusional verb conjugation system, a robust derivational morphology, and lastly an in-depth gender system. I will go into more detail about all of these in their respective sections. Now, it's time to move on to verbs. More specifically, tense, aspect, and mood. The language of the stars inherited its tense system from its ancestor language. This hasn't changed much except for phonological changes. Where the language of the star diverges from its ancestor is the borrowing of a new aspect and new moods, those being the continuous aspect, the conditional mood, the hypothetical mood, as well as borrowing a new system of imperative mood. The tense, aspect, and mood affixes are shown here on screen. Just as a side note, when I show graphs like this, they are in the southern dialect, as that is the one with the most speakers, and honestly, the one that I've most developed. Back to the graph. What is marked with an X is a conjugation that doesn't exist, such as the present perfect. The ones that exist are mostly suffixes attached on the end of a verb. The conditional and hypothetical, however, are freestanding words that come before a verb conjugated for tense, person, and number. You can see that for some of these there are multiple possible conjugations. This is depending on what letter the verb ends in. Here's an example of a verb conjugated for tense, aspect, and mood. The verb is to be. Unlike many languages, this verb isn't very irregular. The conditional and hypothetical are marked for future in their respective aspects. In speech and writing, all of these forms of the verb would be conjugated for person too. And speaking of conjugating for person, that is what I will go through now. As can be seen on screen, these are the prefixes that mark number, person, gender, and animacy. These are added onto a verb to mark all these things, though this isn't the same in all dialects. The ancestor to the language of the stars didn't have a system of gender marking. Rather, it had a system of person, number, and animacy. Due to borrowing, however, from other languages, a gendered system developed in the language of the stars. Prefixes for masculine and neutral were borrowed and adjusted to the grammar, and the old gender-neutral prefixes turned to female ones. This, however, only happened fully in the Western and Eastern dialects. They borrowed a gender system for all persons, while the Southern dialect only borrowed gendered prefixes for the first person, requiring speakers to identify as either male or female in the first person singular, mixed groups being allowed, of course, in the dual and plural number. To better show how all of this works, I have provided some examples on screen. First one, Eraloduđđo Eddja, is a simple sentence meaning a bear ate. Erran being bear, Yods meaning to eat, Eddja marking it for third person animate neuter singular, while the eth specified it happened in the past perfect. The second sentence is a commanding one, So tu yodsdalla. It translates roughly to something like, hey you, eat. Specifically, it is a second person singular masculine vocative pronoun before an imperative construction. That is because the imperative verb isn't conjugated with a prefix, rather a name or vocative pronoun is used before it. But pronouns are a whole another mess that I will not get into right now. The third sentence, Eraloduđđo means a bear would be eating if. This is sort of an incomplete sentence due to there needing to be a second clause specifying the condition most of the time. The last example sentence, Eraloduđđo, means a bear would have eaten. It is a hypothetical construction saying that, well, a bear would have eaten hypothetically. Now, to explain the difference between the conditional and hypothetical, one, the conditional, is for statements such as something bad will happen if you do that, while the hypothetical statements go like don't do that, you can hurt someone, where you can hurt someone would be in the hypothetical mood. Both, of course, can easily be reworded to be in each other's moods. These are, however, distinct moods used in different circumstances. Moving on, we have participles. They're also dependent on dialect. As seen on screen, some of them have different forms. For the present participle, the prefix ida is glued onto an infinitive verb in the southern dialect, while in the western and eastern dialects, the infinitive verb is suffixed with ru, though in both dialects the past participle is ogyu and is prefixed on an infinitive verb. The language of the stars also has a future participle, which is a simple suffix on an infinitive verb, that being la in the south and lu in the west and east. Now, here are a couple examples with participles. First, I just want to explain what a participle is. What it is a verb acting as an adjective, modifying a noun or pronoun. As an example, we have the sentence an eaten egg, which modifies the word egg to mean that it has been eaten, a past participle. Then there is the future participle, which is the same thing only in the future, making an egg that will be eaten. With that section done, I will move on to nouns. So here are the things about nouns that I think are interesting. Those being animacy, ergativity, and the gender system, which might not be what you expect. To begin with, here is the animacy hierarchy of the different dialects. In all of them, divine is at the very top, though in the southern dialect, people are lumped in with the divine. This is due to a sound change that merged the marker for divine and the marker for people in the southern dialect. At the very bottom are, of course, inanimate objects. Now, you might find one thing weird here, that being that weather and the sky is above plants and animals. This is a cultural thing. This isn't exactly an animacy hierarchy, rather it is an agency hierarchy, meaning that things which have more agency over the world and human lives are considered higher up on the hierarchy. The weather, of course, has a higher influence on human lives than most animals and plants, and is often uncontrollable according to this culture. As I said earlier in the video, the animacy hierarchy controls the system of ergativity in the language of the stars. This here is how it looks. Now, you might wonder what it means for a category to be split. What it means is that it is split between the genders. What is considered inanimate and thus ergative, or animate and thus nominative, is different between the genders. Women in this language, or feminine people, mostly stay at their settlements, sometimes going out to pick wild food like fruit and herbs. They are also more in tune with the magical and religious beliefs of the culture. Hence, they see plants and animals as more animate over their lives, more agent. They have more agency in the lives of women, so they talk about plants and animals in nominative-accusative alignments. While men and masculine people often go out hunting for animals. In their world, animals and plants are mere objects in the hands of humans. Therefore, they see them as inanimate and therefore ergative. Now, I should probably explain what ergativity is for those that do not understand or need a refresher. Ergativity, or ergative absolutive alignment, is when the subject of an intransitive verb is treated the same as an object of a transitive verb. An intransitive verb being one that cannot take an object, such as he slept, because you cannot sleep someone, at least not in the simplest meaning of the word. A transitive verb, then, is one that can take an object. In English and many other languages, the subject of both an intransitive and transitive verb are marked the same. He slept, he loves him. The object is the one marked differently. Well, in an ergative alignment, or ergative absolutive, the subject of a transitive verb is marked differently. This looks something like him loves he, where the subject is the one marked and the object stays either unmarked or is marked the same as the subject of an intransitive verb. That is a very simplistic way of explaining it though, and there are many more things to ergativity. I would recommend watching a video about it. I will link some in the description. The ergative absolutive or nominative accusative alignments are decided by the subject of the sentence on a clause level. Meaning that if the subject is animate, the object will also be in nominative accusative alignment, but if the subject is inanimate, even an animate object will be ergative absolutive. Now let's take a look at the cases. As shown on screen, ergative and nominative are unmarked, with the oblique and objective being marked. The oblique is the object of an ergative clause, while the objective is the object of a nominative clause, both direct and indirect for both. There are three other cases: genitive, marking the possessor of something; instrumental, marking the use of something or togetherness with something or someone; and lastly, vocative, used when calling out to someone or addressing them. Now, you might have also noticed that the ergative cannot take the dual number. This is because it is believed that only animate things come in pairs, while inanimate things do not. With that said, here are a couple example words in the language of the stars. First, we have the word mairan, meaning bear. You can see that on screen. Then we have eral, meaning star, part of the name of the language, Eraloduđđo Eddja. And finally, we have oruđ, meaning moon. Moving on from that, I will now show the different forms a noun can take. These are the prefixes that mark where on the animacy hierarchy a noun falls. Inanimate nouns not requiring any special prefix. Prefixes being ua, wo, adj, or, ma, mu, and so. As said previously, the prefix for people and divine merged in the southern dialect due to sound changes, while the western and eastern dialect kept them separated. Next up, there is definiteness. Nouns are marked only with a definite article, while indefinite nouns do not take any particle or affix. The two definites are the animate definite, bajad, and the inanimate definite, uon. Finally, in the noun section, we have the passive voice. Passive constructions are made by switching the subject and the object of the sentence, where now the object governs whether the clause is ergative or nominative aligned. So we have Merran loro aggeiodzed, the bear ate the egg. Loro maran aggeiodzed, the egg was eaten by the bear. Uojan loro golujodzed, the man ate the egg. And finally, loro aggeiodzed, the egg was eaten. As this is the passive, the agent of the sentence can be dropped, as it is in the fourth sentence. In the passive, the verb does not take any person agreement, Rather, it is implied by the noun which governs the sentence. Moving on to other things, we have adjectives. What you need to know about them is that they agree with nouns in case and number, taking on the same suffixes as nouns. Then there are comparatives and superlatives, which both have two levels, inferiority and superiority. Inferiority means that an adjective is smaller than what it is compared to, while superiority means that it is greater than what it is compared to. And as shown on screen, the comparative of superiority, meaning the greater than, is bua. The comparative of inferiority, meaning lesser than, is roduo. The superlative of superiority, meaning the greatest, jalli. And the superlative of inferiority, meaning the smallest, jerra. So, you might wonder, how do you form questions? Well, these are formed by changing the word order around and adding a question particle before the verb. In the East and South, the verb is moved to the beginning of the sentence, making the word order VSO. The West, however, changed this system to SVO. To form questions in the passive voice, you switch the subject and the object around together with switching the place of the verb, making it VOS in the South and East and OVS in the West. Some common question particles are li for yes-no questions, adjan for questions of quantity, and det for questions where something is. Next up on grammatical features is negation. There are two types of negation: negation of words and negation of clauses. To negate a word, you must add the prefix gor. To negate a sentence, however, you add shu after a verb. I have provided two examples. Gorroboth, literally meaning not fast or slow, and gollusavaded, shu, meaning he did not go. Before we reach the final grammatical feature I want to show off, I will quickly go through numerals. All numerals in the language of the stars take on case. If they are modifying a noun, they take on the noun's case. The three first numerals have special forms shown on screen. The rest of them, however, follow the normal noun and adjective conjugation pattern. Then there are adverbial and pronominal numerals. Both these forms take on the suffix oi, where the o only comes if the last letter of a numeral is a consonant. The example sentences here are ine u sui kolla sahteth, meaning I saw them thrice. The other sentence is u sui golaneth, meaning the three of them went. The last thing I want to show is some derivational morphology. Shown here are some archaic affixes. These were inherited from the ancestor language to the language of the stars and are no longer productive. They are ua for divine and people in the south, wua for people, aj for family, or for sky and weather, ma for animals, mu for plants, and so for geographic features. In the course of its evolution, the language also picked up derivational affixes from other languages in the area. Some examples are shown on screen. These are jed, meaning animal, bua, meaning divine animal, uod, meaning something to do with water, terra, having to do with tools, weapons, and armor, and lastly jerv, having to do with language-related terms. Now, for last, I will show just three productive derivational affixes. These are suffixes, and they are an, being an adjectivizer, ma, being an adverbializer, and ang, being a nominalizer. Thinking of it, I should maybe make a video further showcasing the lexicon. Hello, this is Jay. I wanted to make a quick outro where I thank my lovely wife for helping me edit the video and helping me with world building. And I would also like to thank my friend Myra for designing the landmass on which this language is spoken on. And I will take constructive criticism from this video if anyone has any. And hopefully that will help me make future videos. So